He was a titan of industry, a man who had everything: a 9-figure bank account, a mansion in Beverly Hills, and a stunning, ambitious woman by his side. The only thing he didn't have was respect for the quiet, simple wife he kept at home. At the biggest gala of his career, with his mistress on his arm, he decided to show the world just how little his wife meant to him. But he made one catastrophic mistake. He forgot who he was speaking to. He thought he was insulting a nobody. He was, in fact, insulting the one person on earth who had the power to take everything from him. The sunlight that streamed into the breakfast nook of the $20 million Beverly Hills estate was, in Richard Sterling's opinion, aggressive. It was too bright, too cheerful, and it exposed the single, almost imperceptible smudge on the chrome leg of the marble-topped table. "Amelia," he barked, not looking up from his Wall Street Journal. "The staff is slipping. Again." Amelia Sterling, his wife of 10 years, paused mid-sip of her tea. She was dressed not in silk pajamas, but in simple, functional athletic wear, her light brown hair pulled back in a neat tail. She looked like a woman preparing to run errands, not the wife of the man Forbes had recently dubbed LA's new real estate kingpin. She glanced at the smudge. "I'll speak to Maria, Richard. It won't happen again. See that it doesn't." Richard turned the page, the crisp paper sounding like a small thunderclap in the cavernous, silent room. He was the CIO of Vanguard Developments, the fastest-growing luxury commercial real estate firm on the West Coast. In 5 years, he had turned a modest boutique firm into a multi-billion-dollar juggernaut, with skyscrapers altering the skylines of Los Angeles and San Francisco. He looked across the table at his wife. She was fine. Pretty, in a quiet, forgettable way. She kept the house running with an almost obsessive efficiency. The parties were perfect, the staff was immaculate, smudges notwithstanding, and she never, ever bothered him with trivialities. She was the perfect high-quality background furnishing for his high-velocity life. But God, she was boring. His phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up. Chloe. A slow smile spread across Richard's face. He picked it up. "Sterling." "Richie, darling." A throaty voice purred on the other end. "I'm looking at the press release for the gala tonight. You're listed as the keynote speaker. They're calling you the Visionary." "Are they?" "Well, they're not wrong," Richard said, leaning back. He caught Amelia's eye. She was looking down at her teacup, her expression unreadable. He felt a familiar, petty spike of annoyance. She never asked about his work. She never seemed impressed. "You're going to burn that stage down, baby," Chloe said. "I just picked up my dress. It's that red Versace. The one you liked." "The one with the slit," Richard murmured, his mind wandering. "I'm looking forward to it. You'll be at my table, of course. Front and center, where I belong. Text me a picture of the dress," he said, and hung up. Amelia quietly placed her cup in its saucer. "Was that Chloe? Your assistant?" "Executive assistant," Richard corrected her automatically. "And yes, she's finalizing the details for the Sterling Achievement Gala tonight. It's the biggest night in Vanguard's history. We're honoring our top partners." "I know. I have my dress ready." Richard sighed. "Amelia, about that. I need you to blend in tonight. It's a business event. A lot of high-stakes players will be there. I need to be focused on networking. I'll have Chloe with me to handle the introductions and manage my schedule." Amelia's gaze finally lifted. Her eyes were a very clear, very pale grey. "You mean you want me to sit quietly and not embarrass you?" Richard bristled. "I mean, I don't want you distracting me. You know how you get quiet. People think it's rude. Chloe understands the energy of these events. She's a shark, like me." "A shark?" Amelia repeated, the words flat. "I see. And what am I?" Richard finally folded his paper and gave her his full attention. He felt a surge of dominance, the same one he felt when closing a 9-figure deal. "You, my dear, are my refuge. You're the calm harbor I return to. You run this house. You manage our life. That's your strength. Running boardrooms is my strength. Let's not confuse the two. Tonight, I need a tiger by my side. I'm asking you to be the lamb." He stood up, adjusting the cuffs of his $5,000 Tom Ford shirt. "I'm heading to the office. I'll see you at the gala. Try to look festive." He walked out of the room without a backward glance. He didn't see Amelia's hand close around the delicate porcelain teacup. He didn't see the tiny hairline fractures that suddenly spiderwebbed across its surface. He just heard, a second later, the quiet, sharp crack as it broke cleanly in two in her grip. Amelia looked at the two perfect halves of the cup in her hand. She didn't flinch, didn't show a flicker of pain as a bead of blood welled up on her palm. "A lamb," she whispered to the empty sunlit room. "Interesting." She rose, calmly rinsed her hand in the sink, and wrapped a napkin around the small cut. Then, she pulled out her own phone, a simple, nondescript model. She didn't call a friend. She didn't call a lawyer. She opened a secure messaging app and typed a single message to a single contact labeled M. Harrison. The message was simple. "Initiate the Storm Protocol. Effective tonight, 10 p.m. Pacific." The reply was instantaneous. "Confirmed, Madam Chairwoman. Are you certain?" Amelia looked at the smudge on the table leg that Richard had pointed out. She looked at the broken cup. She thought of the red Versace dress. "I am absolutely certain. Let them have their party. It will be their last." The Sterling Achievement Gala was not just a party. It was a coronation. Held in the grand ballroom of the Beverly Wilshire, it was a sea of black ties, flashing diamonds, and the hungry, bright-eyed smiles of people who either had power or desperately wanted to be near it. The press line was 30 deep, flashes popping as senators, tech billionaires, and Hollywood royalty made their way inside. Richard Sterling was the epicenter of it all. He stood on the mezzanine, a glass of 25-year-old Macallan in his hand, soaking it in. Every banner, every custom ice sculpture, every $1,000 floral arrangement bore the sleek, silver V of Vanguard Developments, his company, his empire. "You look like a king," Chloe whispered, linking her arm through his. He looked at her and grinned. The red Versace dress was magnificent. It was less a garment and more a statement of intent, leaving absolutely nothing to the imagination. Her black hair was slicked back, her red lips full. She was a tiger, just as he'd said. She was a weapon. She was a trophy. "You clean up well yourself, Ms. Davis," he murmured, his hand landing possessively on the bare skin of her lower back. He scanned the room for Amelia. He spotted her near a quiet alcove, speaking to one of the catering managers. She was wearing a dress of muted, elegant silver. It was a Carolina Herrera, modest, almost severe in its simplicity. She looked lovely, Richard supposed, but in the way a statue is lovely, cold, distant, and utterly overshadowed by the vibrant, living color of Chloe. He felt a sting of irritation. Couldn't she try to look like the wife of a titan? Couldn't she at least pretend to be excited by his success? A reporter from the Los Angeles Times business section approached him, microphone in hand. "Mr. Sterling, an incredible turnout. Vanguard has truly reshaped the LA skyline. What's the secret to your Midas touch?" Richard beamed, puffing out his chest. He launched into his favorite topic, himself. It's simple, really. Vision. audacity. You can't be afraid to break things to build something better. While my competitors are busy with focus groups, I'm busy signing checks and moving dirt. You have to be a shark. You have to be willing to devour the competition. And you certainly have, the reporter said. The new Century City Tower is a marvel, but a project of that scale. Rumor is you have some very powerful, very silent backers. The parent company, Ethelred Holdings. They're famously reclusive. Can you tell us anything about them? Richard's smile tightened slightly. Ethelred was his one frustration. They were the money, the deep, bottomless well of capital that funded his vision. He'd never met the board. All his dealings were through a proxy, a stiff British lawyer named Marcus Harrison. They approved every proposal, they wired every dollar, but they remained infuriatingly anonymous. Ethelred knows a good investment when they see one, Richard said smoothly. They provide the fuel, I provide the engine. They're smart enough to stay out of my way and let me drive. And speaking of your team, the reporter pressed, gesturing to Chloe, you clearly value a dynamic partner. Ms. Davis, you're always by his side. Chloe preened. Richard needs people who can keep up, people who see the future the way he does. It's an honor to be his right hand. And what about your wife, Mrs. Sterling? The reporter asked, craning his neck to spot Amelia, who was now dutifully checking a seating chart near the entrance. What role does she play in your success? This was it. The moment. Richard felt the scotch, the adrenaline, the worship in Chloe's eyes. He looked at Amelia, standing there looking like a prim administrator, and then at Chloe, who looked like a goddess of fire. He felt a wave of contempt so strong it was almost intoxicating. He wanted to draw a line. He wanted to show everyone who mattered and who didn't. He laughed, a short, dismissive bark. Amelia? Oh, she's essential. He gestured broadly, and the nearby conversations quieted as people turned to listen. Amelia looked up, her grey eyes locking on him from across the room. You see, Richard said, his voice carrying. To build an empire, you need two things. You need a tiger, and you need a house cat. He ran his hand down Chloe's arm. You need someone with fire. A tiger, he stressed, who can hunt with you, who can tear down rivals, who understands the kill. He smiled at Chloe, who was practically vibrating with triumph. Then he pointed his glass directly at Amelia. The entire ballroom, hundreds of people, followed his finger. Amelia stood frozen, the spotlight finding her. And then, Richard continued, you need a house cat. Someone to keep the cushions warm. Someone to make sure the pantry is stocked. He shrugged, a picture of magnanimous condescension. Amelia is the best homemaker a man could ask for. She's simple. She keeps my domestic life organized so I can focus on actual important things. Every king needs a castle, and she's a wonderful, quiet little manager for mine. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. The reporter's smile was frozen. Chloe, however, let out a tiny, triumphant laugh. Richard, mistaking the shocked silence for awe, raised his glass. So, a toast to the tigers and to the patient little house cats who support us. Amelia didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She didn't flush with shame. Her expression remained one of perfect, placid calm. She simply held his gaze for 1, 2, 3 seconds. It felt, to Richard, like a block of ice sliding down his spine. Then she turned. Not abruptly, but with a slow, deliberate grace, and walked out of the ballroom. Ah, she's shy, Richard said, trying to recover the moment. Anyway, as I was saying about the Century City project. But the mood was broken. People were whispering. He had gone too far. He hadn't just insulted his wife. He had been cruel. Richard! Chloe hissed, her fingers digging into his arm, her smile gone. That was a lot. It was the truth, Richard snapped, suddenly defensive. Let's get a real drink. He pushed his way to the bar, ignoring the stares. He didn't know that Amelia wasn't heading for their car. He didn't know she was in a service elevator, riding to a private suite on the penthouse level. He didn't know that in that suite, Marcus Harrison and a team of 4 corporate lawyers were waiting for her, documents and laptops covering every surface. "It's done," Amelia said as she walked in, shedding her silver wrap and tossing it onto a chair. Her face, so calm and placid downstairs, was now carved from granite. "He did it? The public insult?" Harrison asked, his voice grim. "He called me a house cat in front of 200 of our partners and the press," Amelia said, sitting at the head of the table. "He toasted me for being simple." The lawyers winced. 10 p.m., Harrison said, checking his watch. "The protocol is live, Madam Chairwoman. The first locks are engaging now." Amelia nodded. "Good. Freeze everything. Vanguard developments, his personal accounts, the joint accounts, the credit lines. Everything. I want him to wake up tomorrow morning as the man he truly is. A man with nothing." Richard woke to the agonizing sound of a leaf blower. His head felt like it was full of wet cement, and his mouth tasted like the bottom of an ashtray. He fumbled for his phone, groaning. It was 9:30 a.m. He'd come home drunk and belligerent, celebrating his triumph with Chloe. Amelia's car had been gone, and her side of the bed was untouched. Good. He was in no mood for her silent judgment. He checked his phone. 17 missed calls from his CFO, David Chen. 3 from his head of construction. A dozen texts. "Richard, call me. It's an emergency." "Where are you? The Ethelred lines are frozen. Our main accounts are locked. I can't make payroll." "Richard, what the hell did you do?" Richard sat bolt upright, the hangover vanishing in a wash of icy panic. "What?" He dialed David Chen. The man picked up on the first ring. "David, what is this? I'm just seeing your texts." "Richard, thank God. What did you do?" "Ethelred just called in our entire revolving credit line. They're citing a breach of confidence clause. All of our operating capital is frozen. All of it, Richard." "What? They can't do that." Richard threw off the sheets and strode to his home office. "It's a glitch. Call Harrison. Call their finance department." "I have," David screamed, his voice cracking with panic. "I've been on the phone since 6 a.m. Every Ethelred contact has gone dark. Their lines are disconnected. Their emails are bouncing. It's like the entire holding company vanished. And Richard, it's not just the corporate accounts." "What do you mean?" Richard said, his hand shaking as he tried to log into his laptop. "My security team just called. Your access codes to the Vanguard mainframe were revoked at 10:01 p.m. last night. So were mine. We're locked out of our own company." "That's impossible." The login screen on his laptop flashed. Access denied. My God. My God. Richard's blood ran cold. He tried his personal bank, a private account with Goldman Sachs, where he kept his liquid play money. He entered his password. A new screen popped up. "Account frozen. Please contact a banking representative." No. He tried his American Express Centurion card. He called the number on the back. "Mr. Sterling," a polite, automated voice said, "your account has been suspended by the primary account holder." "What primary account holder?" "I'm the primary account holder." "The primary account holder on this corporate account," the voice clarified, "is listed as A.M. Sterling, Ethelred Holdings." Richard dropped the phone. A.M. Sterling. Amelia. Marie. His wife's name. It had to be a coincidence, a clerical error, a horrific, catastrophic clerical error. "Amelia!" he roared, stalking out of the office. "Amelia!" The house was silent. He ran to their master closet. Her side was empty. Not a single dress, not a single pair of shoes, just a row of empty velvet hangers. He ran to the ensuite bathroom. Her toiletries, her skin care, her ridiculous expensive French perfumes, all gone. She had left him. Fine. She could have her little dramatic fit. But how could she freeze his accounts? It didn't make sense. His phone rang again. It was Chloe. "Richie," she said, her voice sharp and brittle. "I'm downstairs. Your gate's not working. The guard says my name isn't on the list." "What?" Hold on." Richard was scrambling, trying to get dressed. "I'm having some security issues. A system glitch." "Well, fix it. I left my laptop in your study, and my card got declined at the coffee shop. It was embarrassing." "Your card?" "My company Amex. It's declined. What is going on, Richard? You look like a god last night, and now everything is falling apart. Fix it." She sounded less like a lover and more like an angry creditor. "I'm on it. I'm going to the office." He ran to his garage, to his Aston Martin DB11. He aimed his key fob. Nothing. The garage door wouldn't open. The car's lights wouldn't flash. A small green light on a new security panel he'd never seen before was flashing red. He was trapped in his own home. He ran to the front door, just as a black Lincoln Town car pulled up to the gate. A man in a simple dark suit got out and approached the keypad. He didn't have a code. He had a key. The massive iron gates swung open. The man, who Richard didn't recognize, walked calmly up the stone path, carrying a briefcase. He didn't ring the doorbell. He used another key to open the front door. "Who the hell are you?" Richard bellowed from the top of the stairs. "This is private property. I'm calling the police." "That won't be necessary, Mr. Sterling," the man said, his voice placid. He placed his briefcase on the foyer table. "My name is John Fields. I'm with the private security team hired by the owner of this property." "I am the owner of this property." "No, sir, you are not," the man said simply. "This property, along with the vehicles, the art and the furnishings, is owned by a private trust managed by Ethelred Holdings. As of 10 p.m. last night, your residency privileges were revoked." Richard stared, his mind unable to process the words. A trust? What trust?" "You are being asked to vacate the premises. You will be allowed to take your personal effects, clothing, toiletries, and so on. My team will escort you. A car will be provided to take you to a hotel of your choosing, for which you will have to provide payment." You can't. This is my house. I bought this house." "The purchase, sir, was made by the Ethelred Trust on your behalf," Mr. Fields said. He was clearly unbothered by Richard's rage. "A courtesy, which has now been rescinded." "Amelia? Did Amelia do this? This is her, isn't it? It's a divorce tactic. It's illegal." "I am not at liberty to discuss Mrs. Sterling," the man said. "My instructions are simply to secure the property. You have 1 hour to pack a bag." "Or what?" Richard sneered, trying to find his footing, his bravado. Mr. Fields looked up at him, his eyes completely neutral. "Or you will be removed for trespassing, Mr. Sterling. And I assure you, you do not want the press, who are already gathering outside your gate, to get a picture of that." Richard's head snapped toward the gate. Chloe was gone. In her place were 2 news vans. The first tremor was over. The earthquake had begun. The next 48 hours were a descent into a bureaucratic hell. Richard, humiliatingly escorted from his own home with a single suitcase, was dropped at the Beverly Hilton. When he tried to check in, his personal credit cards were all declined. Every single one. He was forced to use the last $3,000 in cash from his wallet to secure a room for 2 nights. He sat on the generic king-sized bed, his world spinning. This wasn't a divorce tactic. This was an execution. He spent the entire day on the phone. His lawyers, a high-powered team from Skadden Ops, were baffled. "Richard, we've reviewed the Vanguard organizational charter," his top lawyer, Ben, said, his voice tinny over the speaker. "It's ironclad. You're the CEO, but you have zero equity. Your entire compensation, your bonus structure, even your ownership stake. It was all synthetic, tied to performance, and granted by Ethelred. They are the sole shareholder. We've never seen a structure like this." "What does that mean?" "Synthetic," Richard yelled. "It means you own nothing. You were a high-paid employee, Richard. An incredibly high-paid one, but an employee nonetheless. And the termination clause, my God. It references a morality and conduct addendum that allows Ethelred to terminate for actions bringing disrepute upon the parent company." "What did you do?" Richard thought of his toast, of calling his wife a house cat in public. It couldn't be. That was personal. This was business. "It's my wife," Richard whispered, the terrible truth finally crystallizing. "Amelia. It's her. Your wife. What does she have to do with Ethelred? We're running a search on her. Amelia Marie Sterling, née Collins. Parents were small-time software engineers. No personal wealth, no corporate holdings. She's a nobody, Richard. This is coming from Ethelred, not your wife." "You don't understand?" Richard said, his mind flashing to the name on the Amex account. A.M. Sterling. "It's her. It has to be." He tried to call Chloe. The call went straight to voicemail. He sent her a text. "My accounts are frozen. It's a temporary hostile move by my partners. I need a place to stay and some cash." Her reply came 3 hours later. "Richard, I can't. My job, my reputation. I was your assistant. I can't be seen with you while this is happening. I'm sorry. I have to look out for myself. I've already been contacted by Ethelred's lawyers for an exit interview." He threw the phone against the wall. She had been his tiger, and at the first sign of blood in the water, she was gone. The news broke that evening. Vanguard CEO Richard Sterling fired. Stock of partner companies in free fall. Ethelred Holdings cleans house in shock move. What happened at the Sterling Gala? His name, his face, was everywhere. He was no longer the visionary. He was a disgrace. His phone blew up, but not with calls of support. It was vendors demanding payment, contractors whose work sites had been shut down, employees, his former employees, who were now jobless, cursing his name. David Chen called him one last time. "They're liquidating Richard," David said, his voice hollow. "They're not replacing you. They're dissolving Vanguard developments, selling off the assets. Everyone's fired. 10,000 jobs gone. All of it. The whole thing. It was just a house of cards." Richard was suffocating. 10,000 jobs. His legacy, his towers, all gone. Because he insulted his wife, it still didn't add up. The power was too vast, the punishment too absolute. A wife, even a vindictive one, couldn't wield this kind of corporate power. On the third day, his money ran out. The hotel politely informed him his room key would be deactivated at 11 a.m. He was stranded, toxic, and penniless. Just as he was trying to figure out if he could sell his $20,000 Patek Philippe watch for cash, an email landed in his inbox. It was the only email that had gotten through his firewall. The sender was Office of the Chair, Ethelred Holdings. The subject, Mandatory Summons to General Meeting. The body of the email was brief. "Mr. Sterling, you are hereby summoned to the Ethelred Holdings Executive Headquarters at 1000 Avenue of the Stars, 44th floor, on Friday, October 20th, at 10 a.m. sharp. Your presence is required to finalize your termination and discuss potential legal actions. A car will be waiting for you at your hotel. This was it. His chance to fight. He would meet this mysterious board. He would meet the real power behind Ethelred. He would plead his case, threaten to sue, something. He wasn't going down without a fight. He would find out who this A.M. Sterling really was. He put on his last clean Tom Ford suit, the one he'd worn at the gala, now wrinkled from his suitcase. He tried to project the image of the Titan he had been 3 days ago. But as he looked in the mirror, he saw a desperate, terrified man whose world had been pulled out from under him by an invisible hand. The Ethelred Holdings headquarters occupied the top 3 floors of the tallest, most exclusive skyscraper in Century City, one of the few in the skyline Richard hadn't built. The lobby was a cathedral of black marble and smoked glass, silent save for the hiss of the waterfall feature. It was a place of quiet, terrifying, old-world money. It made his own flashy Vanguard offices look like a frat house. Richard gave his name to the receptionist, who regarded him with open, icy disdain. "Mr. Sterling, you are expected." He was led to a private elevator. There was no button for the 44th floor. The security guard used a biometric thumbprint scanner, and the elevator began its ascent, fast and silent. The doors opened directly into a reception area. A severe-looking woman motioned him toward a set of massive oak doors. "They are waiting for you." Richard smoothed his suit jacket, took a deep breath, and pushed the doors open. The boardroom was staggering. It was dominated by a single, 50-foot table of polished obsidian. One entire wall was a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking all of Los Angeles, a view that made his old office view look like a keyhole. Seated around the table were 12 people, men and women in dark, immaculate suits. He recognized them instantly, and his blood turned to ice. This wasn't just a board. This was a pantheon. There was Koji Tanaka, the most feared private equity head in Asia. There was Lady Annabel Grayson, who ran the largest portfolio of private assets in the EU. There was General Mark Phillips, retired, formerly of the Joint Chiefs, who now consulted for the world's biggest defense contractors. And at the far end, standing nervously, was Marcus Harrison, the lawyer he had dismissed as a proxy. These weren't backers. These were the people who owned the backers. These were people who could buy and sell countries before breakfast, and they were all looking at him with undisguised contempt. "Mr. Sterling," Marcus Harrison said, his voice clipped. "Thank you for joining us. Please take the seat." He gestured to a single, small chair, positioned in the middle of the room, several feet away from the main table. It was the chair of a defendant. Richard sat, his heart hammering against his ribs. "This is quite the collection of talent," Richard stammered. I wasn't aware." "That's precisely the problem, Richard," said Lady Grayson, her British accent cutting through the air. "You weren't aware of much." "I demand to know what's happening," Richard said, trying to summon his old bluster. "You've ruined me. You've destroyed my company. For what? A joke? A personal issue. This is grossly unprofessional. It's tortious interference." "Unprofessional," Koji Tanaka repeated, his voice soft. "A man who publicly compares his life partner to livestock is lecturing us on professionalism. A bold strategy." This is about Amelia?" Richard said, incredulous. "You're liquidating a $10 billion portfolio because of a domestic dispute?" "We are liquidating a portfolio because its CEO proved himself to be a catastrophic liability," General Phillips boomed. "You were given a simple test, Mr. Sterling, a test of character, and you failed it in the most public way imaginable. What test Who is in charge here? Who are you people to her?" Marcus Harrison looked at the empty, high-backed leather chair at the absolute head of the table. "We are the board of directors. We advise. We manage. But we do not rule. Our job is to execute the vision of our founder and chairwoman." "Then I want to speak to her," Richard demanded. "I want to speak to this A.M. Sterling. Where is she? Hiding like she always does." "Our chairwoman values privacy, it's true," Harrison said. "She has always believed that the work should speak for itself. She built this firm from nothing, and her only rule was that her privacy remained absolute. She wanted a quiet life. She trusted us to manage her empire." "But," Lady Grayson added, "she also believed in having a fail-safe. She believed in placing her most valuable assets in the care of someone she could trust implicitly. Someone who, by their very nature, would be underestimated." "What are you talking about?" Richard whispered, a dawning, sickening horror crawling up his throat. "She's not hiding, Mr. Sterling," Harrison said, his eyes moving to the main boardroom doors. "She was simply delayed. She had to finalize the liquidation of your empire." The massive oak doors swung open again. Richard turned. Amelia walked in. But this was not the Amelia he knew. This was not the quiet, mousy woman in yoga pants. This was not the house cat. She was dressed in a navy blue Armani power suit, so sharp it looked like it could cut glass. Her hair, usually in a simple ponytail, was coiled in an intricate, severe chignon. Her simple grey eyes were now the colour of a winter storm, and they were fixed on him with an intensity that stopped his heart. She carried a leather portfolio and was flanked by two lawyers he recognized from the law firm Wachtell Lipton, the most ruthless M&A litigators on the planet. She didn't look at Richard. She walked with a silent, terrifying authority to the head of the table. The entire legendary board stood as she approached. She took her place in the empty chairman's seat. Marcus Harrison pulled her chair out for her. "Madam Chairwoman, welcome." "Thank you, Marcus." "Please be seated," Amelia said. Her voice was the same, but the tone was completely different. It was crisp, authoritative, and utterly cold. Richard was paralyzed. He was vibrating. He couldn't form a thought. "Amelia, what is this? A joke? Are you one of them? A secretary?" Amelia finally turned her head. She looked at him, not as a wife looks at a husband, but as a scientist looks at a failed experiment under a microscope. "Hello, Richard," she said. "Please refrain from speaking unless spoken to. We have a great deal to get through." She opened her portfolio. "Let the record show," she began, "that on this day the board convenes to ratify the termination, with cause of Mr. Richard Sterling, CEO of the now dissolved Vanguard Developments portfolio." Richard finally found his voice. It came out as a strangled gasp. You're A.M. Sterling? You?" Amelia looked up, her expression one of mild annoyance. "Yes, Amelia Marie Sterling. I founded Ethelred Holdings 12 years ago. Vanguard Developments was my pet project, and you, Richard, were my greatest disappointment." The silence in the boardroom was absolute. The only sound was the faint tick-tick-tick of the Patek Philippe watch on Richard's wrist, a watch he now realized she had bought him. "You," he stammered, his mind short-circuiting. "But your parents, you were simple." The word hung in the air, grotesque and foolish. Amelia actually smiled. It was the most terrifying expression Richard had ever seen. Simple. Yes, that was the point. "My father didn't just tinker with software, Richard. He designed the core encryption algorithm for the first global-scale quantum network. He sold the patent for a sum that would make your entire net worth look like a rounding error. He and my mother hated the spotlight, so they retired to a quiet life, and they raised me to value one thing above all: privacy. She leaned forward. I took that inheritance, and at 24, I founded Ethelred. I didn't want my name or my face in Forbes. I didn't want to be on magazine covers. I wanted to build. So I created a structure. I hired Marcus, here, and this brilliant board to be the public-facing avatars of the firm. I remained anonymous, the reclusive A.M. Sterling, pulling the strings from a quiet life. And me? Richard whispered, the blood draining from his face. What was I? You? Amelia said, her voice clinical. You were an experiment. I met you when you were a mid-level manager at a small firm. You had a spark. You were ambitious, driven. I thought you were brilliant. I fell in love with that drive. I thought, here is a man who can build with me. So you funded me? I didn't fund you, Richard. I created you, she stated. I founded Vanguard Developments for you. I cleared the path. I fed you the capital. I made the calls behind the scenes to get your permits approved. Your vision? Your Midas touch? It was my capital, my connections, and my strategy. You were just the arrogant, loud-mouthed front man I put in place to take the credit, because, unlike you, I don't need credit. I need results. Richard shook his head, denial warring with the horrific, obvious truth. But our life, the house, the parties. You were just my wife. Yes, Amelia said, and I liked that part. I wanted a partner. I wanted a home. I thought I could have both. I thought you loved me, Amelia, the simple woman, not the CEO of Ethelred. It was the perfect test, and for a few years it worked. But you got lost. You started to believe your own press. You started to believe you were the titan, and I was just the house cat. She gestured to the lawyers. The gala was not your first mistake. It was just your last. For 2 years, Richard, I have watched you. You started embezzling. Don't lie, she snapped, and for the first time, her voice cracked like a whip. The entire board flinched. The red Versace dress for Miss Davis? Billed to a Vanguard corporate account as client entertainment. The penthouse apartment you keep for her in Santa Monica? Leased by a shell company funded by Vanguard's discretionary budget. The 3-carat diamond earrings you bought her for her birthday? Classified as partner gifts. You weren't just cheating on a wife, Richard. You were stealing from a chairwoman. You were stealing from me. She pushed a thick binder across the table. That is a full forensic audit of your last 24 months. You have defrauded Ethelred Holdings of approximately $4.2 million. Enough to put you in federal prison for a very, very long time. Richard stopped breathing. Prison. Amelia, please, he begged, his voice breaking. He slid off the small chair and onto his knees. Amelia, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I was an idiot. I was arrogant. Please don't do this. I love you. I've always loved you. Amelia looked down at the pathetic, broken man kneeling on the marble floor. Her face was utterly unmoved. No, Richard. You loved the idea of me. You loved having someone quiet to clean up your messes. You loved having a lamb to make you feel like a tiger. But the insult, that, I could have almost forgiven. People say stupid, cruel things. But you said it in front of my partners. You said it in front of the press. You compromised my position. You humiliated A.M. Sterling, not just Amelia. You mistook my privacy for weakness and my silence for stupidity. And in doing so, you proved you were not only a bad husband, but a terrible, reckless CEO. She stood up. The board has voted. Your termination is effective immediately for cause, citing gross misconduct and felony embezzlement. Ethelred will not be pressing charges. A tiny flicker of hope lit in Richard's eyes. On one condition, Amelia continued, her voice dropping to an icy whisper. You will sign this. A lawyer placed a single document in front of him. It's a full confession and a divorce settlement. You will walk away with nothing. Not the house, not the cars, not the art, not a single dollar. You will admit to the fraud, and in exchange for my silence, you will vanish. You will relinquish any and all claims to my assets, Ethelred's assets, and you will sign a permanent, global, non-disclosure agreement. If you ever speak my name, or Ethelred's, or connect me to it in any way, the full force of this firm's legal team and the U.S. Attorney's Office will come down on you. You will die in prison. Richard's hands were shaking so hard he couldn't hold the pen. You built your entire identity on my money, Richard. Now, you get to see what you're worth without it. He looked up at her, his eyes streaming with tears. Amelia, please, I'm nothing without you. Amelia nodded, a final, chilling confirmation. I know, sign the papers. He grabbed the pen and scribbled his name, his signature a frantic, desperate scrawl. Good, Amelia said. She turned to her security chief. Mr. Fields, escort Mr. Sterling from the building. He is now, officially, a trespasser. Richard was hauled to his feet. As he was dragged past the obsidian table, past the silent, powerful board, he looked back one last time at the woman he'd called his wife. She had already turned away, facing the window that overlooked the city she owned, her city. She was already discussing Q4 projections with Lady Grayson, as if he had never been in the room at all. 6 months later, the cover of Forbes magazine was not a man. It was Amelia. The photo was a stark, black and white portrait. Her grey eyes stared directly into the camera, radiating an intelligence and power that was unmistakable. The headline was simple: The $1 Trillion Ghost. A.M. Sterling steps out of the shadows. The article was the most read story of the year. It detailed the shocking dissolution of Vanguard Developments, exposing Richard Sterling as a profligate and fraudulent CEO who had been living on the genius of his anonymous powerhouse wife. It painted a picture of a woman who had, for a decade, been the most powerful and invisible force in global finance. The story of the gala had become a legend in corporate circles. They called it the Purge. Amelia, it turned out, hadn't just liquidated Vanguard. She had reallocated its assets. She had taken the best projects, the few brilliant but ignored engineers, and the soundest assets, and folded them into a new, leaner, more aggressive company under her direct control, Sterling Core. It was already valued at triple what Vanguard had been. Her days of hiding were over. She was seen at Davos, in London, in Tokyo. She moved through the world not as Richard's +1, but as the titan she had always been. The lamb was, it turned out, the dragon that owned the entire mountain. And Richard, he was a ghost of a different kind. He was living in a 1-200 a month studio apartment in Van Nuys, the paint peeling on the walls. The NDA and the confession had blackballed him from the industry forever. No one would hire him. No one would even speak to him. He had sold his Patek Philippe for rent money, his Tom Ford suits for groceries. He had tried to contact Chloe, but her number was disconnected. He'd heard she'd moved to Miami, trying to attach herself to a new titan. Richard Sterling, the visionary, was now a temp. He was working in the mailroom of a mid-level insurance firm, a job he'd gotten using his college degree and omitting the last decade of his life from his resume. One afternoon, he was sorting mail when he saw the Forbes magazine come through, his replacement's name on the subscription. He stared at Amelia's face. He saw the woman who had shared his bed, the woman who had organized his sock drawer, the woman he had dismissed so completely. He thought of the power, the money, the life. He had held the winning lottery ticket in his hand for 10 years, and he had set it on fire because he was too arrogant to read the numbers. He tossed the magazine into the correct mail slot and moved on to the next one. His hands, which had once signed $100 million deals, now rough and stained with ink. Across town, in the 44th floor boardroom, Amelia Sterling stood before the window. "Madam Chairwoman," her new assistant, Sarah, said, "the team from Goldman Sachs is here to discuss the Sterling Core IPO. They're very nervous." Amelia smiled, a real, genuine smile. "Good. Let them be nervous. Send them in. And Sarah?" "Yes, ma'am?" "Order lunch for the whole team, and have them double-check the air conditioning in the engineering bay. Those new quantum servers are running hot, and I want my people comfortable." "Right away," Sarah said, scribbling a note. Amelia looked out at the city, at the half-finished towers that had once been Richard's. Her new firm was already buying them, refitting them, finishing them her way. She had taken his name off every plaque, every building, every letterhead. She had built an empire, hidden inside it for protection, and been forced to burn it down. But now, from the ashes, she was building a new one. And this time, it would have only one name on the door: hers. Winter in Van Nuys was a dreary affair of cold, persistent rain that made the grey streets look even greyer. Richard Sterling stood under a bus stop awning, nursing a lukewarm coffee from a 7-Eleven. The thin windbreaker he'd bought at a thrift store did little to stop the chill. His mailroom shift had ended, and he was just trying to work up the energy to take the bus back to his peeling studio apartment. A car pulled up to the curb in front of him, its engine a low, purring growl that was alien to this neighborhood. It was a black Maybach, polished to a mirror finish, the raindrops beading on its waxed surface like tiny jewels. Richard scowled, clutching his paper cup. He hated these cars. He hated the reminder of the life he'd lost. He watched, bitter, as a chauffeur in a black suit hurried out to open the rear door with a large black umbrella. A leg emerged, then a figure. It was Amelia. Richard's heart stopped. He physically recoiled, pressing himself against the bus stop's grimy plexiglass. It was her, here, in his gutter. She was wearing a cream-colored wool coat that probably cost more than his entire year's salary. Her hair was down, and she looked sharp, focused, and utterly out of place. She was speaking to her assistant, Sarah, who had emerged from the passenger side. They were pointing at the nondescript 2-story office building beside them. "The acquisition is final, Sarah," Amelia said, her crisp voice cutting through the rain. "I want the new server integration to begin by Monday. This AI algorithm is the final piece for the Sterling Core logistics network." Richard's blood went cold. This building, the one he passed every day. She had bought it. She was here, on his street, expanding her empire into the very last place he'd felt safe from her memory. He must have made a sound, a gasp, a choked curse, because her head turned. Her eyes, clear and grey as the rainy sky, swept past the bus stop. They passed over him, then flickered back, their gazes locked across the 20 feet of wet pavement. Richard stood frozen. He saw it all in that 1 second. The man he was. The man he had become. The cheap coffee, the frayed cuffs, the hollow look in his own eyes. He was a ghost at the feast, and he wanted to scream. He wanted to beg. He wanted to rage. Amelia looked at him. There was no recognition. There was no hatred. There was no pity. There was no triumph. There was nothing. It was the look a person gives a stranger they've accidentally made eye contact with on a train. It was a brief, impersonal flicker of acknowledgement that another human being was occupying space, followed by an immediate and total dismissal. In that single, empty glance, Richard Sterling was not her ex-husband. He was not the man who had betrayed her. He was not even the man she had destroyed. He was just a random, shivering man at a bus stop. She turned back to her assistant, as if he had never existed at all. "Let's go. We're late for the call with the Tokyo board." She and Sarah walked into the building, the chauffeur closing the door behind them. Richard was left alone in the rain, his entire body trembling. The humiliation at the gala, the firing, the eviction. None of it, compared to this. To be looked at with such complete, soul-crushing indifference. He was so far beneath her that he wasn't even worthy of being an enemy. He was simply irrelevant. His coffee cup crumpled in his hand. The bus pulled up, its brakes hissing. He didn't get on. He just stood there, staring at the empty curb where the Maybach had been, soaking in the cold, hard rain. And that's the end of our story. A brutal lesson in why you should never, ever mistake kindness for weakness or privacy for a lack of power. He thought he was the shark in the tank, but he was just a goldfish swimming in her ocean. She gave him the world, and he insulted her in it, so she did the only thing she could. She took it all back. What did you think of Amelia's ultimate revenge? Was it too harsh, or did Richard get exactly what he deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. If you love stories about justice, dramatic twists, and powerful characters getting the last laugh, then you've come to the right place. Please hit that like button if you enjoyed this story, and share it with someone else who loves a good dose of drama. Most importantly, make sure you subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. We post new, gripping stories just like this every single week, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for listening. He was a man who had everything: a corner office on the 50th floor, a tailored suit worth more than most cars, and a ruthless ambition that had scorched everyone beneath him. His secretary Clara was just another rung on his ladder, diligent, intelligent, and inconveniently pregnant. When his ambitious mistress, Serafina, wanted Clara gone, he did it without a second thought. He fired her, publicly, humiliatingly. What he didn't know, as he watched her walk away, was that Clara wasn't just his secretary. She was Clara Hayes, the only daughter of the man who owned the entire building, and the reckoning was just beginning. Julian Vance lived his life 50 floors above New York City, and he believed this altitude granted him a kind of divinity. His office at Vanguard Equity Partners wasn't just a room, it was a testament to his arrival. It was a cube of glass, suspended over the city, and from it he viewed the world, and his employees, as tiny, manageable subjects. Julian was a man carved from ambition. At 38, he was the youngest senior vice president in the firm's history, and he wore his success like armor. Bespoke Tom Ford suits, a Patek Philippe watch that chimed on the quarter hour, and a smile that was both dazzling and predatory. Outside that glass cube sat Clara Hayes. Clara was, in every way, the antithesis of Julian's flash. She was quiet, methodical, and possessed an intelligence that was as deep as it was unobtrusive. For 2 years, she had been the perfect secretary. She anticipated his needs, corrected his mistakes before he made them, and managed his chaotic schedule with an unnerving calm. She was, as Julian often bragged to his peers, a mind reader. But 6 months ago, Clara had become an inconvenience. She was pregnant. Her body, once neatly professional, was now undeniably round. Her presence, once efficient, now seemed to Julian to be a constant, ticking reminder of biological messiness. He loathed it. It wasn't just the impending maternity leave, a scheduling black hole, he'd called it. It was the visual of it. It screamed weakness. It screamed domesticity. It screamed everything Julian had sacrificed to get where he was. "Clara!" he barked through the intercom, not looking up from his terminal. "My 10 a.m. client notes. Now." "They're on your desk, Julian," her calm voice replied instantly. "I placed them there an hour ago. Open to page 3, where you'll find the discrepancies in their Q3 report." Julian glanced down. There they were. He grunted, annoyed at her preemptive competence. His annoyance was being actively stoked by Serafina Croft. Serafina was the firm's new head of strategic marketing, hired 3 months prior. She was fire to Clara's ice, all sharp angles, blood-red lipstick, and a laugh that echoed with undisguised avarice. She and Julian had fallen into a discreet, then flagrant affair almost immediately. Serafina didn't just want Julian's affection, she wanted his power, and she saw Clara as a stubborn obstacle. Serafina sauntered over to Clara's desk, leaning against it hip-first, deliberately crowding Clara's space. She was holding a steaming mug. "Still here, Clara?" Serafina purred, loud enough for the entire floor to hear. "I'm surprised you can still fit behind that desk. You're blooming." Clara didn't look up from her screen. "I'm fine, Miss Croft. Can I help you with something?" "Oh, just admiring your dedication," Serafina said, taking a sip. "Julian is so kind to let you keep working. Most women in your condition would be at home, nesting or something." A few junior analysts snickered. Clara's fingers paused on the keyboard. Beside her, Mary, the older executive assistant for another partner, shot Serafina a venomous look. Mary liked Clara. She'd seen ambitious sharks like Serafina devour good people for sport. "I'm more effective here, Miss Croft," Clara said evenly. "Are you, though?" Serafina shot back. Julian was just complaining that the Sanderson files were late. "Pregnancy brain, I suppose?" Clara's head snapped up. "The Sanderson files are not due until tomorrow at 5. Julian wanted them today. He must have forgotten to tell you," Serafina said, with a fake pout. "Don't worry, I handled it for him." Clara watched her walk away, a perfectly straight seam running up the back of her designer skirt. Clara looked at her digital scheduler. The Sanderson deadline was, indeed, tomorrow. Serafina was lying. She was building a narrative. This wasn't the first time. For weeks, Serafina had been helpfully pointing out Clara's lapses. A meeting missed that had been rescheduled by Serafina herself. A coffee order that was wrong, though Julian had changed his preference that morning. Small, insidious cuts designed to bleed Clara's reputation dry. And Julian, blinded by Serafina's ambition and his own, was letting it happen. Later that day, Julian had a crisis. A major client, the pension fund for the state of Ohio, was threatening to pull their $800 million portfolio. Their representative was on a conference call, and he was furious. "I'm looking at this proposal, Vance, and it's a joke," the man yelled through the speakerphone. "You've miscalculated our exposure by nearly 15%. This is amateur hour." Julian was sweating. He was shuffling papers, his charm failing. "Mr. Henderson, if you'll just let me explain." Clara, listening from her desk, quietly printed a single sheet of paper. She walked into the glass office, ignoring Serafina, who had perched herself on the guest chair, and slid the paper in front of Julian. On it were 3 bullet points. Julian paused. He read them. His posture changed. "Mr. Henderson," Julian said, his voice suddenly smooth as silk. "I haven't miscalculated. You're looking at the projections before we factored in the new federal bond acquisitions. If you'll turn to Appendix D, subsection 4A, which my team prepared this morning, you'll see we've actually shielded your exposure. The 15% discrepancy isn't a loss. It's a hedge that's already paying dividends. There was a silence on the line. Well, why didn't you say so? I prefer to let the numbers speak for themselves, Julian said, leaning back. He won the call. The client was pacified. When he hung up, Serafina ran a hand up his arm. You were brilliant, Julian. You saved us. Julian straightened his tie, his gaze falling on Clara, who was quietly retrieving the paper. Clara, get the Henderson contingency file updated, and next time, try to keep up. Clara paused at the door, her back to him. Of course, Julian. She walked out. Julian didn't see the look on her face, but Mary at the next desk did. It wasn't defeat, it wasn't sadness, it was a cold, calculating patience. It was the look of a chess master watching her opponent knowingly walk into a trap. The trap was being set, but not by Clara. It was being set by Julian and Serafina over $300 stakes at the Onyx Room, a restaurant so dark and exclusive it felt like a vault. She has to go, Julian, Serafina said, swirling a glass of Cabernet. The crimson liquid caught the light from the single candle. She makes you look soft. Julian loosened his tie, away from the fluorescent lights of the office. His ambition felt purer, more justified. She's pregnant, Sarah. Firing her is a legal nightmare. The optics are terrible. Optics? Serafina laughed, a low, throaty sound. We're not talking about optics. We're talking about your future, the partnership, the Asia-Pacific expansion. Do you think David Morrison got to be CEO by worrying about optics? He got there by being decisive, by cutting liabilities. She leaned in, her voice dropping. And she is a liability. She's slow, she's dowdy, and she's watching us. I don't like it. Julian frowned. She's a secretary. She's not watching anything. Isn't she? Serafina countered. She saved you on that Henderson call. How did she know that? How was she that prepared? It's like she's auditing you. It's creepy, Julian. And frankly, I want her desk. I want to be right outside your office. I can be your partner in this, Julian. Your real partner. But not while she's there, playing Mother Superior. The image she painted was potent. Serafina, in her sharp suits, sitting guard at his door. Serafina, anticipating his real needs. It was an intoxicating thought. The pregnancy had repulsed him, but Serafina was right. Clara's quiet competence was, in its own way, a threat. It felt like judgment. Fine, Julian said, his voice hardening. We cut the liability, but it has to be clean. It has to be for cause. Then we find a cause, Serafina smiled, raising her glass. The cause began the next day. It was a two-pronged attack. Manufacture a performance issue and sabotage her reliability. The first step was a file. The North Star acquisition was Julian's flagship project, a $2 billion deal. The final signatory papers were due by courier to London by 10 a.m. Friday. This was a hard deadline. Missing it would incur massive penalties. Clara had the package prepped by Wednesday. She logged it for international courier pickup, triple-checked the customs forms, and placed the bright red, wax-sealed envelope in the secure outgoing mail slot. She sent a confirmation email to Julian. North Star package is secure and logged for 8 a.m. pickup tomorrow, Thursday. It will arrive in London with 24 hours to spare. Julian read the email. Serafina was leaning over his shoulder. See? He whispered. She's on top of it. It's impossible. Nothing is impossible, Serafina whispered back. She waited until 5:30 p.m., when Clara, moving a little slower than usual, packed her bag and headed for the elevator. Clara was the last to leave their section. Mary, the other assistant, had left hours ago. At 5:35 p.m., Serafina walked calmly to the mailroom. She flirted with the night shift clerk, asked him to find a lost earring near the sorting table. While he was distracted, her hand darted into the International Secure slot. She retrieved the bright red envelope. She didn't destroy it. She simply slipped it into her oversized designer handbag. At 7 p.m., she and Julian were in his office. He was pacing. "This is insane, Sarah. This is a felony." "It's a clerical error, Julian," she cooed, placing the envelope on his desk. Clara's error. She must have forgotten to put it in the slot. Look, here it is, sitting on her desk, buried under a memo. She must have left it this afternoon. How tragic. How forgetful. She then moved to Clara's computer. Clara, trusting, had her password saved in a desktop file for Julian, in case of emergency. This, Serafina decided, was an emergency. She logged into Clara's email. She found the confirmation message sent to Julian. "North Star package is secure and logged." Serafina smiled, and with a click of the mouse, she deleted it. Not just from Clara's sent folder, but from the server-side recall. Then, she went into Clara's scheduler and deleted the courier pickup appointment. "There," she said, logging out. No email, no appointment, just a package sitting on her desk. Missed. A multi-billion-dollar deal, jeopardized by her incompetence. By her pregnancy brain. Julian stared at the package. This was the point of no return. This wasn't just firing someone. It was destroying them. He picked up the package. He opened Clara's desk drawer, the one with her spare sweaters and prenatal vitamins, and dropped the package inside, kicking it to the very back. "It's done," he said, his voice hollow. "Good," Serafina said, kissing him hard. "Now tomorrow, we'll be in the Chicago office. We'll be unreachable. By the time anyone realizes the package never left, it will be Friday morning. It will be too late, and it will be entirely her fault." They left the office, partners in crime. Back in the darkness, the green light on Clara's computer terminal blinked off, but across the hall, a small red light on a ceiling-mounted security camera, the one Julian always assumed was just for show, remained on. It had captured Serafina's 5:35 p.m. visit to the mailroom. It had captured her logging into Clara's computer. It had captured everything. Friday morning was electric with panic. The first call came at 9 a.m., London time, which was 4 a.m. in New York. Julian, asleep in his high-rise apartment, ignored it. The second came at 5 a.m. from his boss, David Morrison. Julian answered that one. "Vance, where in God's name is the North Star package?" Morrison bellowed, his voice cracking with transatlantic static. "Our London team is sitting here with the board, and the documents are not here. The 10 a.m. deadline is in 1 hour. Julian feigned groggy confusion. "What? That's impossible." Clara confirmed it was sent. "Well, it wasn't," Morrison roared. "You fix this, Vance. You fix this now, or your partnership is dead." The line clicked. Julian was wide awake. He frantically called the office. Clara, who always arrived at 7 a.m., picked up. "Clara, where is the North Star package?" Julian yelled, genuine panic now mixing with his manufactured rage. "It's... what?" Clara's voice was instantly alert. "Julian, it's in London. I sent it Wednesday for Thursday pickup." "It's not in London. The courier company has no record of a pickup. Did you log it?" "Yes, of course I logged it. I emailed you the confirmation." Clara was typing furiously. "Julian, the email. It's gone. The scheduler appointment. It's not here." "What do you mean it's not there?" Julian spat. "Did you forget? Clara, did you forget to send the most important package of my career?" "No, Clara was stunned. She was searching her desk, her mind racing. I don't understand. I know Find it, Clara. Find it, or you are finished. Julian hung up. He showered, shaved, and dressed with methodical care. He put on his most expensive suit. Today was a day for an execution. He arrived at the office at 9 a.m. sharp. The floor was a morgue. Everyone knew the North Star deal was dead. The firm would face millions in penalties, but worse, the reputational damage was catastrophic. Clara was pale, standing by her desk, her hands resting on her stomach. She looked defeated. "My office, Clara." "Now," Julian said, his voice devoid of all warmth. Serafina was already inside, sitting in the guest chair, examining her nails. She looked up as Clara entered, a mask of false sympathy on her face. "Clara, I'm so sorry. This is just a tragedy." "Julian, I don't know what happened," Clara began, her voice shaking but firm. "I took that package to the mailroom myself. I logged it. I emailed you. Someone. Julian cut her off, his voice dangerously low. "Or something? Like pregnancy brain, Clara? Is that the something?" Clara recoiled as if struck. "How dare you?" "I dare," Julian said, stepping closer, "because I trusted you. I looked like a fool this morning. This firm is now exposed to litigation and ruin, all because my mind-reader secretary was too busy picking out nursery colors to do her one simple job." "That is not true," Clara said, her voice rising. "I have never missed a deadline. I have never failed you. This is a mistake. This is wrong." "It's a failure, Clara. A catastrophic failure," Julian said. He leaned on his desk, the picture of a disappointed, betrayed leader. "Serafina was the one who found the package. Go on, Sarah, tell her." Serafina looked up, her eyes wide with mock sadness. "Clara, I found it this morning, in your desk drawer, under a pile of baby magazines." This was a lie too far, a vicious, unnecessary embellishment. "What?" Clara whispered. She physically staggered back. No, I would never. Someone put it there." "Who, Clara?" Julian laughed, a cold, barking sound. "The mailroom gnome? Serafina? Me? Do you hear how paranoid you sound? You're hormonal, you're forgetful, and you just cost this company its biggest deal of the decade." He circled his desk and stood over her. She had to tilt her head back to look at him. "I can't have unreliable people on my team," he said. "The partnership is expanding. We're moving into Asia. I need sharks. Clara, not this." He gestured vaguely at her stomach. Clara's eyes, which had been wide with shock, suddenly narrowed. The fear vanished, replaced by that same cold, calculating calm Mary had seen before. "Julian," she said, her voice quiet, "you are making a terrible mistake." "No," he said. "My mistake was not doing this months ago. You're fired, Clara, effective immediately." "Julian, you can't," Serafina said, playing her part. "I can and I am," Julian snapped. "Performance. Gross negligence. I have more than cause. Security is on their way up." The entire office was watching through the glass walls. They could hear the raised voices. Mary had her hand over her mouth. "You're firing me," Clara stated, not a question. "Because of a package you know I sent. You're firing me, 6 months pregnant, to give my desk to your mistress." The air left the room. Julian's face went from angry to purple. Serafina shot to her feet. "How dare you!" Serafina shrieked. "Shut up, Serafina," Clara said, her voice cutting through the air like a razor. She never broke eye contact with Julian. "You will regret this, Julian Vance. You will regret this more than any other decision in your short, pathetic life. "Get her out," Julian choked out, pressing the security button on his phone. 2 uniformed guards arrived. "Mr. Vance?" "Ms. Hayes is no longer an employee. Please escort her from the building." The guards looked uncomfortable. Escorting a visibly pregnant woman out was a new low. "Ma'am, if you'll come with us." Clara didn't look at them. She looked only at Julian. She let the silence stretch, imprinting his furious, triumphant face into her memory. Then she turned, with all the dignity she could muster, and walked out of the glass office. The guards followed. Someone had already brought a cardboard box to her desk. She didn't have much. A framed photo, a coffee mug, a small plant. Mary rushed over, tears in her eyes. "Clara, I'm so sorry. I know you didn't." "It's all right, Mary," Clara said, her voice soft now. "It's not your fault." She placed her few items in the box. As she did, her sleeve rode up, revealing a simple, elegant watch. It wasn't a Rolex or a Patek. It was a vintage Cartier, understated, but worth more than Julian's entire collection. No one noticed. She picked up the box. The entire floor was silent, watching her walk of shame to the elevators. Serafina was standing in the doorway of Julian's office, a triumphant smirk on her face. Clara passed her and paused. "You know," Clara whispered, just for Serafina. "The camera in the 50th floor hallway. It has a surprisingly clear view of the mailroom. You should really fix your hair before you commit a felony next time." Serafina's face turned to chalk. Clara smiled just once and walked to the elevator. The doors opened. She stepped inside, box in hand, and as the door slid shut, she allowed herself one single shaky breath. Then she pulled out her phone. She didn't call a lawyer. She didn't call her husband. She hit a number on her speed dial. "Dad," she said, as the elevator began its descent. "It's done. He did it. He fired me." A deep, kind voice rumbled on the other end. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" "I'm fine, Dad. But Vanguard Equity is not. The rot is worse than we thought." "I'll be there in an hour," the voice said. "It's time I came out of retirement." Clara didn't live in a cramped one-bedroom apartment. She lived in a sprawling, 5-story brownstone on the Upper East Side, a fortress of old money and quiet elegance. The doorman, a kind man named Patrick, who had known her since she was a girl, rushed to take her box. "Ms. Hayes," he said, his face creased with worry. "You're home early. Is everything all right?" "Everything is precisely as it should be, Patrick," Clara said, managing a smile. "Is my father here?" "Mr. Hayes is in the library, Mum. He's been waiting for you." She walked past the soaring ceilings and the original Rothko paintings in the foyer, her heels clicking on the marble. She entered the library, a room panelled in dark mahogany and smelling of old books and leather. Harrison Hayes stood by the window, looking out over the private garden. He was a man in his late 60s, but he radiated an energy that shamed men half his age. He wasn't tall, but he was broad, with a full head of white hair and eyes so blue they seemed to bore through steel. This was the man who had built Vanguard Equity Partners from nothing, a legendary, almost mythical figure on Wall Street. The press called him the Architect. For the last 5 years he had been happily retired, leaving the day-to-day to his hand-picked successor, David Morrison. He turned as she entered. "Clara." He enveloped her in a hug, his hand going to her belly. "And how is my grandchild?" "He's kicking," Clara smiled, leaning into him. "He's as indignant as I am." "He has my blood, after all," Harrison chuckled. He led her to a deep leather armchair and poured her a glass of water. "Tell me everything. From the top." Clara recounted the entire sordid affair. The Henderson call, the missed package, the lies, Serafina, the public humiliation. Harrison listened, his face impassive. He was a man who listened for a living, and his stillness was more terrifying than any rage. He used the phrase, "pregnancy brain?" Harrison asked, his voice soft. He did, and then he gestured to my stomach and said, "I need sharks, not this." Harrison closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the blue had turned to ice. Julian Vance, I remember him. Wharton, same as you. Top of his class. I thought he was hungry. I didn't realize he was depraved. This had all been Clara's idea. A year ago, she had been a rising star at a rival firm, already a junior partner. But she'd been hearing things about her father's company. Rumors, whispers of a toxic Shark Tank culture that had taken root since his retirement. Talk of bullying, of shady accounting, of good people being pushed out. "It's my legacy, Dad," she had told him. "It's our name on the building. I won't let it be rotted from the inside." She'd had one condition. She would go in with her mother's maiden name, Hayes. No one would know who she was. She'd start as a floater, learn the systems, and find the source of the rot. Her father had argued, but she was as stubborn as he was. Her credentials were so good, she was placed as Julian Vance's secretary within a month. His reputation as a difficult manager was legendary, and no one else would take the job. "I thought he was just an arrogant bully, Dad," Clara said, sipping her water. "But this is criminal. Serafina Croft and he, they're stealing." "Stealing?" Harrison sat up. "You have proof?" "More than proof," Clara said. She walked to the desk and pulled out a slim, encrypted flash drive. "Julian thought I was reading baby magazines. I was running forensic accounting on his discretionary marketing funds, the ones he directs to Serafina." She plugged the drive into a laptop. "Serafina isn't just his mistress. She's his launderer. 3 months ago, she incorporated a shell company, Croft Media Solutions. Since then, Julian has approved over $4 million in consulting fees to this company. The invoices are for market synergy analysis and brand strategy. They're boilerplate nonsense." She pulled up another file. "Here are the bank transfers from Croft Media Solutions to an offshore account in the Caymans, an account held by a holding company. And guess who the sole director of that holding company is?" "Julian Vance," Harrison finished, his voice grim. "He wasn't firing me because I'm pregnant," Clara said, the pieces clicking into place. "He was firing me because I was there. I was the one who processed his expense reports. I was the one who saw the invoices. He and Serafina, they thought I was just a dumb, pregnant secretary. They got sloppy. They were afraid I was getting too close." "The North Star package," Harrison said. "It wasn't just to get you fired. It was a distraction, a big, messy, public execution to draw everyone's attention away from the real crime." "Exactly. And they used my pregnancy as the perfect, believable excuse for my incompetence." Harrison stood and walked back to the window. The silence in the room was heavy. "David Morrison," Harrison finally said. "He's a good man, but he's blind. He wants to see the best in people. He let this happen." "What do we do now?" Clara asked. Harrison turned. The kindness was gone from his face, replaced by the cool, lethal focus of the architect. "Now? Now we remind them whose name is on the building." He picked up his phone. "Robert, get the jet ready. We're going to the office. And call an emergency meeting of the entire board of directors. Tell them Harrison Hayes is back." He looked at his daughter, a fierce pride in his eyes. "And Clara, It's time for you to change out of your secretary's uniform. You're going to need your Wharton suit for this." Julian Vance felt like a king. He had slept the sleep of the victorious. The North Star deal was a disaster, yes, but he had already spun it. He had spent all of Friday afternoon in crisis meetings with David Morrison, the CEO. "David, I am shattered," Julian had said, a masterpiece of feigned grief. "I trusted her. I think I was too sensitive to her condition. I didn't want to add to her stress, so I wasn't as vigilant. I blame myself." Morrison, a man who valued empathy, had bought it. "It's a terrible lapse, Julian, but you're right. The timing, it's a mess. Don't worry. Our lawyers will handle the fallout. You just focus on the partnership. We need your leadership." The partnership. It was still his. He had cut the liability, and he was being rewarded for it. Now it was Monday morning. He walked into the lobby of the Vanguard Tower, his $3,000 leather shoes clicking on the granite. He nodded curtly to the security guard, his mind on Serafina, who was already upstairs. She had officially moved her things to Clara's old desk, right outside his glass cube. Everything was in its right place. The elevator was packed with junior analysts, all of whom went silent when he stepped in. He was a god to them. Terrifying, but a god. When he stepped out onto the 50th floor, however, the atmosphere was wrong. It wasn't the usual Monday morning hustle. It was silent, tense. Mary, the older assistant, was at her desk, her eyes red. When she saw Julian, she gave him a look of such pure, unadulterated contempt that it actually made him pause. "Good morning, Mary," he said. Mary just turned back to her screen. He shrugged it off. He walked toward his office. Serafina was not at her new desk. Strange. Then he saw it. An email flagged, "Urgent Mandatory," had arrived at 8:01 a.m. Subject, "Emergency Board and Senior Partner Meeting, 9 a.m. Location, the Founders Boardroom, 52nd floor. Attendance, mandatory, no exceptions." Julian's heart gave a little thrill. This was it. The North Star fallout was over, and this was his promotion. They were gathering the partners to announce him. They were probably fast-tracking it to show the firm was stable, moving forward. He checked his reflection in the glass, straightened his Brioni tie. He was ready. He took the private executive elevator to the 52nd floor. This floor was for board meetings only. It was quiet, opulent, and smelled of old money and furniture polish. He pushed open the massive oak double doors to the founder's boardroom and stopped dead. The room was full. The entire executive board, all 12 members, were seated. David Morrison, the CEO, was there, looking pale and nervous, not at the head of the table but on the side. At the head of the table, in the high-backed chair that had sat empty for 5 years, was Harrison Hayes. Julian's blood turned to ice water. He had never met Harrison Hayes. He had only seen the oil portrait of him in the lobby. The man in the portrait was smiling. The man at the table was not. "Mr. Vance," Harrison said, his voice quiet but echoing in the cavernous room. "You're late. Take a seat." Julian's legs felt like lead. He fumbled into the only empty chair. It was at the far end of the table, opposite Harrison. He felt like he was being judged from a mile away. "Where is Serafina Croft?" Julian managed to ask. "Ms. Croft is indisposed," Harrison said. "She's with our head of security and our internal audit team. It seems there are some irregularities in her marketing budget. But we'll get to that." Julian's mouth went dry. This was not a promotion. "I have been retired for 5 years," Harrison began, his eyes sweeping the table, landing on every single board member. "I left this firm, Vanguard, in your hands. I trusted you to maintain the culture I built, a culture of integrity, of diligence, and of respect. He steepled his fingers, his icy blue gaze finally landing and staying on Julian. Instead, I find a culture of bullying, of theft, and of staggering incompetence. Mr. Morrison, you were CEO. How did this happen? David Morrison looked like he was going to be sick. Harrison, I had no idea. The internal reports, Harrison cut him off, were doctored. The profits from Mr. Vance's division, for example, have been exaggerated. His successes, it seems, were not his own. Julian gripped the arms of his chair. Mr. Hayes, I don't know what you've been told, but my division is the most profitable in the firm. The Henderson call just last week. Ah, yes. The Henderson call, Harrison said, a thin smile playing on his lips. The one you brilliantly saved. A call where you miscalculated a client's exposure by 15%, and your secretary had to slide you the answer. Julian was speechless. How? How do you— I know, Harrison said, because my head of internal review told me. You see, I've had someone on the inside for the last 8 months. Someone I trust implicitly. Someone with a Wharton MBA, a background in forensic accounting, and a vested interest in this company's good name. Harrison nodded to the double doors. You can come in now. The doors opened. In walked Clara Hayes. She was not the Clara he knew. The mousy brown hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon. The drab maternity blouses were gone, replaced by a dark navy blue Armani pantsuit, custom-tailored to accommodate her pregnancy. She wore her power as comfortably as he wore his arrogance. She looked, Julian realized with a jolt of pure terror, exactly like the man at the other end of the table. She was not carrying a box. She was carrying a leather-bound portfolio. Clara, Julian breathed, his voice a dry rasp. The rest of the board was staring, their minds scrambling to connect the dots. That's Ms. Hayes Donovan to you, Mr. Vance, Clara said, her voice clear and cold. She took a seat at the table, to the right of her father. Clara Hayes Donovan, daughter of Harrison Hayes, and as of 8 a.m. this morning, the new Chief Operating Officer of Vanguard Equity Partners. David Morrison lunged forward. Harrison, this is my daughter. David, Harrison snapped. And she is the only person in this room who has done her job. Please, Clara, proceed. Clara opened her portfolio. Good morning, gentlemen. For the last 8 months, I have been working as an executive assistant to Mr. Vance. My father and I were concerned about the cultural rot that was eroding this firm's foundation. We were right to be. She looked directly at Julian. Her eyes were not angry. They were worse. They were diagnostic. Mr. Vance, she began, on Friday, you fired me for gross negligence, specifically for failing to courier the North Star acquisition documents. You didn't send them, Julian stammered, falling back on his lie. You left them in your desk. Serafina found them. No, Clara said flatly. I did not. On Wednesday, at 4:51 p.m., I personally logged the package and placed it in the mailroom's secure bin. At 5:37 p.m., she nodded to a man in the corner who dimmed the lights and turned on the large projector screen. Ms. Serafina Croft entered the mailroom. The screen lit up with grainy, time-stamped security footage. Serafina clear as day, distracting the clerk and stealing the red envelope. A collective gasp went around the room. At 7:14 p.m., Clara continued, as the footage changed. Ms. Croft and Mr. Vance are seen entering his office. At 7:19 p.m., Ms. Croft is seen logging into my terminal, using my credentials. She proceeds to delete my confirmation email and the courier appointment. The video was silent, but the implications were deafening. Julian was white. And at 7:21 p.m., Clara said, her voice dropping, Mr. Vance is seen taking the North Star package and placing it inside my desk drawer. The video showed him do it. The board turned as one to stare at him. You, Julian sputtered. You set me up. No, Julian, Clara said. You set yourself up. I was just the secretary. I was just the hormonal, forgetful, pregnant woman. You never, ever thought I'd be a threat. You never thought I mattered. You were so blinded by your own arrogance and your affair that you committed mail fraud and conspiracy right in front of a security camera. But why? David Morrison asked, his face ashen. Why would you, Julian? Sabotage a $2 billion deal just to fire a secretary? That, Harrison Hayes said, is the billion-dollar question. Clara looked back at Julian. The look of a cold, satisfied predator was gone from his face. Now it was just the pathetic, sweaty fear of a man trapped. He didn't fire me because he thought I was incompetent, Clara said to the board. He fired me because he was terrified I was competent. She clicked to the next slide. It was a complex flowchart of bank accounts. Julian Vance and Serafina Croft were not just having an affair, Clara announced. They were embezzling. For the last 3 months, Mr. Vance has been approving ghost invoices from a shell marketing company. That company, Croft Media Solutions, was founded by and is solely owned by Ms. Croft. In 90 days, they have siphoned $4.2 million from this firm. She pointed to a line item. This $4.2 million was then wired to a holding company in the Cayman Islands, a holding company named J. Vance Capital. Ring any bells, Julian? Julian Vance made a sound, a low, strangled noise. I processed those invoices, Clara said. I saw the signatures. You got sloppy, Julian. You thought I was too stupid or too distracted by my condition to notice that you were approving multi-million-dollar invoices on a Friday afternoon without a single line of due diligence. You fired me to stop me from talking. You fabricated the North Star crisis to make my firing so spectacular, so public, that no one would ever believe a word I said. I would just be the crazy, pregnant secretary who cost us all. She stood up, slowly, and walked around the table until she was standing directly behind him. He was frozen, staring at the screen that showed his financial ruin. You didn't fire me for your mistress, Julian, she whispered, so only he and the man next to him could hear. You fired me for your greed. You just used my pregnancy as your excuse. You gestured to my child, my son, and called him a liability. You called me this. She moved back to her seat. Mr. Vance, you are a thief. You are a conspirator. And worst of all, you are a fool. The heavy oak doors of the founder's boardroom shut with a final, damning click. The silence that fell was heavier than the wood. Harrison Hayes's words, report, still hung in the air, a guillotine that had just dropped. Julian Vance, a man who had lived his entire life on a diet of adrenaline and other people's fear, was now a statue of pure, waxy terror. The two detectives, businesslike and unimpressed by the bespoke suit and the 52nd floor view, moved to his chair. Mr. Vance, you are under arrest for conspiracy, wire fraud, and embezzlement, the taller detective said, his voice a monotone that cut through Julian's paralysis. Please stand and place your hands behind your back. Julian finally broke. It wasn't a snap. It was a crumble. No, he whimpered, a sound so pathetic it made the board members physically recoil. No, wait, you don't understand. It was her. It was Serafina. She seduced me. She set this all up. She planted the files. It was her idea. Clara, who had remained standing, let out a sound of pure, unadulterated disgust. Pathetic, she said, her voice clear and carrying. "Even now, even with the cuffs literally on their way to your wrists, you cannot take responsibility for a single one of your actions. You blame the woman you were sleeping with. You blame the woman you fired. You are a black hole of a man, Julian. Nothing is ever your fault." As the cold steel clicked shut around his wrists, Julian's terror-fueled denial finally cracked, revealing the raw, venomous hatred beneath. He surged to his feet, a snarling, cornered animal. "You!" he spat at Clara, his face purple. "A secretary. You set me up. This was all you." "I did my job, Julian," Clara said, her voice impossibly calm. "The one I was hired for, the one you paid me for. You just never bothered to ask what it was. You thought I was there to fetch your coffee. I was there to protect my family's name." Marcus Thorne, a senior partner and Julian's primary ally on the board, finally found his voice. "Harrison, this is madness," he sputtered, standing up. "Arresting a senior VP in the boardroom? The PR fallout. This is precipitous. We need to handle this internally." Harrison Hayes didn't even turn his head. "Sit down, Marcus," he said, his voice dangerously low. "You're embarrassed because you backed the wrong horse. You're part of the internal problem I'm handling." He nodded to the detectives. "Get him out of my sight." The detectives began to pull Julian toward the door. As he passed Clara, he lunged, his cuffed hands straining. "You'll run this company into the ground, you sentimental bitch. This place needs sharks, and you're just weak." Clara didn't flinch. She stood her ground, forcing the detectives to yank him back. She looked him dead in the eye, her gaze a surgeon's scalpel. "My sentiment, Julian, is the one variable your arrogant mind never accounted for. My sentiment is for the 4,000 employees whose futures you gambled with. My sentiment is for the name my father built. You only accounted for your wallet. Enjoy your new accommodations. I hear the views are terrible." His shriek of rage was cut off as the doors closed behind him. The room exhaled. Harrison Hayes let the silence stretch for a beat before he spoke. "As for Ms. Croft," he said, "she is in a conference room on the 40th floor with our audit team and her own lawyer. Faced with the video evidence, she has already provided a full confession, attempting, like Mr. Vance, to pin the entire scheme on him. It won't work. She will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." He then turned his gaze, which had lost none of its icy fire, on the remaining men. "And now, to the board." His eyes landed on David Morrison. The CEO looked 60 seconds from a heart attack. "David," Harrison said, and the use of his first name was a judgment in itself. "You are a good man. You are a kind man. You are not a leader. You let this infection fester in my company because you were too afraid to ask hard questions. You valued stability over integrity, and in doing so, you nearly cost us both." Morrison stood, his hands shaking. "Harrison, I am so sorry. Clara, Ms. Hayes Donovan, I had no idea. I am terribly, terribly sorry for what he did to you." Clara cut him off, not with malice, but with precision. "David, your job wasn't to have an idea. It was to know. You were the custodian of this firm, and you let the wolves into the nursery. Your apology is noted. Your resignation is accepted. You will leave with your full pension, but you will sign an NDA that ensures you never speak the name Vanguard again." Morrison nodded, utterly broken, and walked out of the room. "Marcus," Harrison said, turning to the last dissenter, "you backed him. You championed his shark mentality. You're out. Clean your desk." "You can't do this," Marcus blustered. "I can," Harrison said. "This entire board is dissolved, effective immediately. It will be reconstituted under the new COO's direction by the end of the day. You can leave on your own, or you can follow Mr. Vance in cuffs for aiding and abetting. Your choice." Marcus Thorne, his face pale, fled the room. Finally they were alone. Just Harrison and Clara in the vast, silent boardroom. The morning sun streamed in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Harrison let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for 5 years. "Well, Madam Coe," he said, a weary pride in his voice, "your first day has been eventful." Clara walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the city 52 floors below. The same view Julian had prized. "He wasn't the only rot, Dad," she said quietly. "He was just the loudest. The culture here, it's broken. It's what you always taught me not to be." Harrison came to stand beside her, putting a hand on her shoulder. "I know," he said, his voice thick with a rare emotion. "I let it get away from me. I was so busy building the machine, I forgot about the people inside it. I was so afraid of being done, of being irrelevant in retirement. I let profit become a substitute for purpose." He turned to her, his blue eyes searching hers. "That's why you are the new COO, not me. I'm going back into retirement, for real this time. This is your firm now, Clara. Fix it." Clara put her hand over his, her other hand resting on her belly. "I'm scared, Dad. It's so broken. And with the baby." "Your pregnancy isn't a liability, Clara," he said fiercely, echoing her earlier words. "It's a perspective. It's your greatest asset. You're not just building for the next quarter. You're building for the next generation. That's what I lost. That's what you'll bring back. Now, shall we go reintroduce you to your new team?" They walked together to the 50th floor. The atmosphere was a funeral. The entire floor was frozen, watching them. They saw Julian's glass cube, now empty. They saw security guards boxing up Seraphina's things from Clara's old desk. Clara walked to the center of the floor. Everyone stared, whispering. "Mary," Clara called out. Mary at her desk looked up, her eyes wide with terror. She thought she was next. She slowly approached. "Clara, Ms. Hayes. Ms. Hayes, Donovan." Clara smiled, a real, warm smile. "Mary, for 8 months, you were the only person on this floor who showed me genuine kindness. You have more integrity in your fingernail than Mr. Vance had in his entire body. You are my new executive administrator. Your title and your pay will reflect your seniority and your value. We start now." Mary's hands flew to her mouth, and she burst into tears of sheer, unadulterated relief. It was the first crack in the ice. That afternoon, Clara held an all-hands town hall in the firm's main atrium. She stood in front of 500 employees, her father standing off to the side, a proud observer. She used no microphone. Her voice, trained in Wharton lecture halls, carried. "My name is Clara Hayes Donovan," she began. "My father, Harrison Hayes, built this firm. For the last 8 months, you knew me as Clara Hayes. On Friday, many of you watched me get fired, humiliated, and escorted from this building. This morning, you watched Mr. Vance get arrested." A nervous murmur went through the crowd. "The era of Vanguard as a shark tank is over," she declared. "Sharks are lazy, solitary predators. They eat their own. From today, we will be a wolf pack. We are intelligent, we are strategic, we are collaborative, and we protect our own. This will be a place of integrity first. Profit second, because integrity, in the long run, is profit." She laid out her new vision. "The rot stops today. I am firing every manager in this firm with a credible HR complaint of bullying or harassment. Their positions will be filled from within, and my first act as COO She paused, her hand going to her stomach, is to announce the new Vanguard parental leave policy. 6 months, fully paid, for all employees, mothers, fathers, and adoptive parents, because family is not a liability. It is our foundation. A stunned silence. Then, led by Mary, a slow, building wave of applause that became a roar. The next 6 months were a war. The sharks she fired didn't go quietly. Marcus Thorne's allies tried to sue for wrongful termination. Clara countered, in person, with the meticulous evidence of their complicity and incompetence she had gathered as a secretary. Forbes magazine ran a scathing article titled, "The Heiress's Hobby. Can a Pregnant Idealist Run a Wall Street Firm?" Clara's response was to write a fiery op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, titled, "Yes, she can, and she's doing it." It went viral. She was vilified on financial TV as sentimental and naive, then praised by a new generation as a visionary. The firm's best and brightest, who had been suffocating under the old guard, flocked to her. Profits dipped for 1 quarter, then soared, driven by a new, massive, green energy fund she had personally championed. The legal reckoning was absolute. Serafina Croft, faced with the video and her own paper trail, folded completely. She testified against Julian, detailing his greed and his paranoia. She received 2 years in a low-security federal prison. Julian, blinded by his own narcissism, made the fatal mistake of refusing a plea deal. He was convinced he could charm a jury. The trial was a circus. He painted himself as a visionary, betrayed by a spurned lover and a conniving secretary. But the prosecution had Clara's meticulous notes, the high-definition security footage, and the bank transfers. The jury convicted him on all counts in under 45 minutes. At his sentencing, the judge, a woman in her 60s, looked down at him with contempt. "Mr. Vance," she said, "you are a man of profound arrogance and a complete lack of character. Your crimes were not of passion, but of a cold, calculated greed. But what the court finds most appalling is your cruel and unusual humiliation of an employee in a vulnerable condition. You used a woman's pregnancy as a weapon. You are, in short, a bully. You are sentenced to 8 years in a state penitentiary." He screamed, a high, thin sound of disbelief as he was led away. 8 months after the boardroom coup, the 50th floor was unrecognizable. It was bright. The glass cube of Julian's office had been dismantled, replaced by a large, open-plan collaborative workspace. People were talking, laughing, arguing over whiteboards. Clara sat in her new office, a warmer space with comfortable chairs, on the same floor as her team. She was on a conference call, finalizing the acquisition of a tech startup. Her desk was covered in reports, but also a small, silver-framed sonogram. She was in mid-sentence when she stopped, her breath catching. She smiled, a small, tired but triumphant smile. Mary, now her unflappable chief of staff, noticed immediately. "Ms. Hayes, is it?" "It is," Clara breathed, closing her laptop. "Call my husband, and tell the Tokyo board. The call will have to be rescheduled for tomorrow morning. My son has decided on an earlier-than-expected arrival." Harrison Hayes met her at the elevator, holding a brand-new baby carrier, beaming. "Ready, Madam Coe?" "More than ready, Dad," she said, squeezing his arm. As the elevator doors closed, the floor didn't panic. They didn't whisper. They stood, and they applauded their leader. Clara Hayes Donovan had built a company that could run without her for a few hours, or a few months. The new foundation was strong. It wasn't built on fear. It was built on trust. What a story of karma and consequences. It just goes to show that you never, ever know who you're talking to. Julian's arrogance and cruelty weren't just his moral failing. They were his financial ruin. He saw a pregnant secretary as a weak, disposable problem, but he was actually abusing the most powerful person in the building. Clara proved that true strength isn't about yelling, bullying, or wearing an expensive suit. It's about intelligence, patience, and knowing exactly when to make your move. She didn't just get revenge. She rebuilt an entire company in her own, stronger image. What did you think of Julian's takedown? Was it satisfying? Let me know in the comments what your favorite part of the story was. If you loved this story, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see justice served, and make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss another real-life drama. We have new stories coming every week. Thanks for listening.